Good morning all. Guys, we'll try to continue our discussion regarding Dbms SQL commands. In the previous session, we have discussed about many things. First, before starting the today's session, guys, we'll try to recall the things of last session. Last session, we started our discussion from that means writing of some queries by using multiple tables that we have seen, right? So then after that we explored the many clauses of select query, that means how to retrieve a data that we have discussed. Then after that we entered into the wonderful topic of that SQL query that we called by name aggregate function. Sometimes there could be a possibility that user might go with retrieving a data by counting some attribute value or by averaging an attribute value, right? Or he might go with retrieving the maximum value in the column or a minimum value in the column and its corresponding values, right? All such things. So for that we discussed about aggregate functions actually in the last session. What are all the different aggregate functions we discussed is a sum, average, sum, it will perform that addition of the particular specified column as what we passed as an argument some aggregate function, right? So where it can take the attribute names, right, the column names as an argument, each aggregate functions. Then after this we discussed about count, where it counts the number of rows which are present in a specified table, right? So that we can find out, that means in the specified attribute that we can do with the help of count aggregate function. Then after that we discussed about one more aggregate function we called by name minimum, where min gives us min of attribute name, that in the specified attribute column which is the minimum value that will be picked, right? So in max of some attribute name, where it gives me that opposite to that minimum, that means it gives us always the maximum in the specified attribute column, right, attribute name. Then after that we discussed about average, where it performs addition and divide by that number of rows as where it goes for an addition, right? So that we have seen. Then after that I think we discussed about some bug especially in finding a min and a maximum. Usually in case of a MySQL easily we can able to get a minimum value and a maximum value, but it always gives us, we have seen that, we have explored, it always gives us the corresponding not that corresponding row value. Instead of that, it always picks the first row value, right, that we have seen. Then what is the solution, how we can solve this problem that we have seen? So how we solved actually, guys? So what we did is first we picked the half thing is right, in the answer, right? So for that what we did is we took the half right answer, and with that we'll try to build that another half answer. How is first pick a maximum with the help of select max from table name, that attribute name, by specifying in the max max aggregate function. Then in outer query, try to find out probably could be the query as what we have written is retrieving a directors who are having a maximum age. Let me take out, right, this one. So there always maximum age is 41, but it always leads 10 Rajesh with a 41, right? This is right. So for that what we did is select max of age from director, and in the outer query write down the select star from director where age is equal to this maximum age, right? So this is what we have done. So that means when we are learning that query, when we are exploring that the problem, there we have find one more interesting thing. What is that, guys? So even we can able to write multiple queries, and we can join queries, not only a joining of tables, even SQL supports the joining of queries, right? So where we have written a query within a query, and that we call by name nesting of queries. Usually we call by name in general terminology nested queries, right? So that we have seen. So nesting of queries also allowed, where we can go with any levels of nesting. During that time, always that inner query will be executed, then always the innermost query output will become an input for its outer query, and it's that means always subquery results become an input to the outer query result, right? And once if all conditions are true, then only things will be retrieved, that particular row from a table will be retrieved, that we have seen. So we have viewed there are many operators to join, like in, not in, then equal to, not equal to, all such things, less than, greater than, which are the relation operators we are having, along with that in, not in, all such things we can make use to join. Even we'll try to explore few more things related to that. So related to that, let me take up one such small example. Retrieve the directors. As per this example, I want one information. Look at this one. So we are having a movie table and we are having a director table. So my intention is to find out a director who has not directed any movies, guys. Are you getting? So I am talking about a nested queries, the continuation of nested queries. We'll try to solve few more problems for nesting, right? So let me pick up. I want to retrieve the directors who have not directed any movies. So how can I find out, guys? Do we have any solution? First, by seeing a data, how we need to write a query means, first our approach is to see the data, that means the table attributes as an initial learner of SQL query. What we need to make is SQL. First, we have to go through the tables and its data, then try to find a mathematical solution for that, right? Then simple thing is, what solution you got, then how you got that solution. You ask that question to your brain, automatically definitely it reveals the secret, that means what is the logic behind it, right? So we'll try to solve this. So my question is all about, I want to retrieve the director details who is not directed any movies. Do we have any such director? First, we'll try to look into that. So I want director details who has not directed any movies. When we are going to say, guys, actually a director who has not directed any movie as per this part of this data. So is that a director table alone itself is enough to say or come to a conclusion or a judgment that this director has not directed any movie? No. It requires two tables. Why? The director table doesn't give any hint that whether this director directed any movies or not. No, it doesn't reveal any such data. Could be that he could be a director of some serial, right? That also be there, or a drama, right? Here we are having a list of movies, guys. So, and here we are having a DID column. Suppose if DID value of this director, if it occurs at least once in a movie table DID column, it's an indication that the director has definitely directed some movies, right? Fine. That means if this value, if it occurred at least once, it's an indication that the director has directed a movie. Now, that means as part of this question, as a solution, we need in search of a director IDs, where those director IDs which should not be there in the DID list, right, of this movie table. It should be there here, but it should not be present here, right? So that we have to make it. So or we can say it's a director DID column minus this movies DID column. Suppose when I go with this minus operator in terms of a set theoretic notation, right? So it is one set and this is a one set. What I want? Things which are present only in this set, not in that, right? So for that, this minus that we can do in case of relational algebra, that we'll discuss in upcoming session. But currently, how we can solve? That means I want to list all directors who are present only here. That means from this we conclude one thing: director IDs which are present only in the director DID column and should not be present in the movie column, right? Then definitely such directors have not directed any movies, right? Let me check, friends. So what we can do? First, list directors. Let me check. Select star for what? I want to list all attributes, DID, D name, age, all three columns I want to list. Select star from what? Which is the table, guys? We required, I want to list first this table because the director details which are present only here, so for that I'll make use of this one. From director, fine, director, super. What next, guys? The DID of director, let me write the DID of this director. Let me say director D, can I say? Sure, I can write. So when I say director D, then D becomes an alias for the table director that we have seen, that aliasing concept, right? So D dot director, that I can write. And this DID is what we have written, this one, right? That should not be present here, It is from which table? Movie table. Let me write. Movie table contains a DID, right? Movie table contains a DID, and this DID is what we have written. This should not be in this list, not be in the list, right? So for that, it should not be in list, not in this one, not in this list. So let me write select. Always attribute to be written where, friends? In the select class. Movie, can I able to write it as m.did, movies DID. It's a table name. Where to write? In the from class. Select m.did from movie. So for that, what it will do is the outer query, inner query, select m.did from movie, it is enclosed within this one, right? Not in followed by this query. We are enclosing this query to its out in this outer query, right? So that this become a sub query. This is a sub query, or we can call it by name. It's a inner query, and this we called by name outer query. The inner query results becomes an input to the outer query that we have seen, right? So let me check, friends. What could be the output of this inner query? Select m.did. When I write from movie with no condition, then it lists out all DIDs, here. So for that, the outcome of this is m.did, this one, right? This column, movies DID, that is 10, 10 and 11. Then in the outer query, what we have written, guys? We have written d.did. d.did means it goes to the first row of a which table? Director table, and it picks the first value. What is that, guys? 10. And this DID holds a 10, and it checks whether 10 is not in the list of this m.did. 10, no, at least if it present once, then that will not be picked. This is what the beauty of this not in. Not in means it goes for checking, it picks this value and checks whether it is not there in the list, not there in the list. Even if it is not present in this list, that means even at least once also if it is not present, it's an indication that it is true. Yes, 10 not in. Is it true? No, false. 10 it is in, right? This is false. Once if it is false, always if things are false, then the row will not be retrieved, right? So here also same thing. 10 is not in the list. No, it is in the list. So for that this becomes false. So for that this will not be retrieved. Then control moves to where, friends? It moves to the next row. What is that? The 11. So DID holding now 11. 11 is not in the list. No, 11 is in the list. So again it is a false, right? So this also not be retrieved. Then what is the next row? The control moves to the next row. What is that? 12, right? DID is 12 and checks 12, DID 12, but it is not in the movie.did list. 12, do we have any 12, guys? No 12 in. It's an indication that 12 is not in this list, means the condition becomes true and retrieves the things. What's the answer, guys? 12 Suhas 18. Let me check whether it works or not. That's it. What we did first? First, we are going with retrieving all director details. Select star from director D, right? We have written. Then followed by what? Where D dot DID, right? Select star from director. We have written. Look at this one. Start from director D, where D dot DID should not be in the list. Not in the list of where, guys? That we'll try to enclose in the subquery, right? As a subquery. Where? Select in the movie table, right? Movie table. Select m.did from movie. Movie m, right? That's it. It retrieves me m.did retrieves me from movie details, right? Movie DID details. Then put a semicolon, put enter. That's it. We got answer, 12 Suhas 18. This is what a right answer. 12 we have seen, 12 Suhas 18. So 12 is not present in the list. That's it. So this is what one form of nesting we have seen. One query contains another query. With the help of this query, we learned one interesting operator, guys. What is that? We are connecting this query with this query, inner query with the outer query, with the help of one operator. What is that? Not in, right? Then one thing we learned here is not in. With the help of this not in, we can able to connect two queries possible, right? We can connect an inner query with the outer query, that we can do, right? So always it goes for what? It checks for a condition whether the outer query tuple should not be there in the inner query list. It checks, and it checks it with a multi-set result. Look at this one, guys. It's a multi-set result. That means the set contains multiple values. Then such kind of a thing we call it a multi-set result. That means multiple values were present, right? We are having. So this value will be compared with the multiple values, right? This is what a one thing. So few of my friends having a question like this. Sir, can't we make use of, actually what we are doing is whether 10, first it picks a 10, whether 10 is not equal to this one. Actually in the not in we are doing that one, 10 should not be there here. That means can't we make use of this not equal to, because in the previous session when we were talking about the maximum value, finding a maximum, the elder person, that means a director who is having a maximum age, there we would equal to, right? As similar to that, can we make use of a not equal to solve this query? Sure, we can make use, but what happens, let me check. Through that, let me compare the two things. What happens when I write the same query by using not equal to? Let me check. What we did, select star from director, director D, right? Then after this, where select star from director, where D dot did should not be equal to, this is what a query we plan to write, should not be equal to select m dot did from movie m, right? This one. Select star from director D, where m dot, where D dot director ID should not be equal to that select m dot did. This is what a query we have written. That means we are just replacing not in by not equal to. But what happens, it doesn't works. Why, put a semicolon, that's it. Look at the beautiful error. From this, definitely we can understand what exactly is happening, right? Where exactly this not equal to fails, right? So that we can find it with this. So subquery returns more than one row. Look at the answer. Look at the outcome, guys. Subquery returns more than one row. It's an indication that as part of this, what's the expected answer? That means what are all the, how many rows actually this subquery is retrieving. Subquery retrieving 3 values. Look at this one, 10, 10, 11, as per this. 10, 10, 11, 3 values, not a single value, right? So that's why it is saying it's a violation of the rule. That means it has to be compared. Let's say maximum, if 10, I can compare it with only one value. The left hand side can be compared with maximum of only one value, either using equal to or using not equal to. How the or with less than, or with greater than, all such things I can compare. That means all these operators, equal to, not equal to, less than, less than equal to, greater than or equal to, all works only with, that means they are having a capacity or a capability to compare the two quantities only, right? One at the left hand side and the other one at the right hand side. It can compare only those two quantities. But look at the situation here, guys. We are having in the left hand side only one value, and in the right hand side, this is the right hand part, right? So how many values we are having? 10, 11, 10, 11. 3 values, I should compare this with all these 3 values. Suddenly this equal to or not equal to, less than, greater than, it says, no man, I cannot do. Because it's having some limitation. Definitely these operators I can make use for connecting a subquery, that means the inner query with outer query, I can connect it. But when subquery returns a multi-set result, that means more than one value, suddenly it says, no man, I cannot compare, because in one end we are having a one value, and the other end I am having a huge value, set of values, more than one value. There it fails, right? But in the previous session, sir, equal to it works, But yes, in the previous session, equal to works. That means picking a maximum age from director column, right? This is what a query we have written. Could be one small example. What we did in the yesterday session is select max age from director, right? Then in the outer query we have written select start director details, right? From director where d dot age, director D, if I say d dot age should be equal to, we have written. This works here, but this fails. Why? It is because that max of age, when I write in the director table, then always a maximum is the only one number. Is there any possibility that a maximum can retrieve a multiple values? Though, even though, suppose guys, if I'm having a director, let me check, let me take up. Here, suppose if I'm having a more than one time this 41, then what happens? During the time also, maximum of age, when I execute, then it retrieves me only one value to this. That means max of age is holding only one value, that is 41. So it picks outer query, that means each row from the director table, that is a 20, and compares it with one value. That means in both the end we are having only one quantities. Easily I can compare it with the help of either equal to, less than equal to, not equal to, greater than equal to. That means those operators are eligible to compare those two things, are having a capacity to do such kind of comparisons, right? But here the case is not like that, because in the right hand side we are having a multi-set result, multiple values. When subquery returns a multi-set result, then outer query with the help of this equal to, not equal to, less than, greater than, fails to compare those things. During that time, what best thing we can do, guys? Suppose when I want to check it with not equal to checks for this should not be equal to, that means left hand side should not be equal to the right hand side value. This is what, this quantity should not be equal to this quantity. So it compares only one quantity. Suppose if I want to compare left hand side one quantity, in the right hand side, if I am having a series of set of quantities during the time to compare such kind of a things, I want the elaborated or an extended version of this not equal to, that is what? The not in. When I say not in, left hand side, not in this list, the list could be anything, 1 lakh, 1 crore, no issues, right? It compares the left hand side single quantity, whether it is not in the list which are specified or which are retrieved from a subquery, right? So this is how things will work. If it is not present in the whole list, then the condition becomes true, then it retrieves the things, right? So this how exactly the not in works. That means we can say it works as that, we can say it's an extended version of not equal to, I can say, right? And one more thing I can say, one conclusion I can make at this point of time. Wherever we can, because with not equal to I can compare only one quantity. Suppose if I am having only one quantity in the right hand side, then can I able to make use of not in here? Sure, I can make use, because it works not only for single, even it works for multiple quantities. So from this one thing we can conclude, guys. What is that? If subquery returns only one result, either I can make use of not equal to or not in, or if subquery returns a multi-set result, I can make use of always a not in, not equal to, right? So that we can learn from this. So with this, we can do we can come to one more conclusion argument. What is that is, I can replace a not equal to by a not in, but not in by a not equal to always. Are you getting? I'll repeat the things. We can replace a not equal to by a not in, but not in by a not equal to, it is not always true, right? It always doesn't fit, but not in fits for not equal to position always, right? So that's it. Thank you, guys. Let me go with the continuation of this thing. Let me say, for example, I want to list all directors. Let me check with equal to, one small snap of equal to. I want to retrieve all directors who are all directed movies. Directors who are all directed movies. So which all the tables are required? Actually, to solve this, we require operators, actually, right? These are all operators. Fine, not in, to connect subquery with the outer query, right? Especially nesting of queries, for that we'll make use of these operators. especially to work with multi-set result. Let me check, write one more query. With that, we'll try to learn one more beautiful operator and with some comparison, especially because we are at the right position to connect two queries, especially in nesting. Look at this one, guys. I want to retrieve the directors who have directed some movies, at least one movie. Let me check, repeat the question. Retrieve the directors who are all exactly opposite to the previous question. In the previous question, what I asked? I asked retrieve the director details who have not directed any movies. So not in have you done, we solved, right? And there we learned the difference between not equal to and not in, where to use not equal to and where to use not in, right? So how not in fits for all situations that we have seen, where we can make use of not equal to, right? In all such situations, I can make use not in. Next, especially connecting subqueries, right? Not with the help of comparing two values in the where class with some one attribute value not equal to not in of another attribute value, right? Instead of that, always it is to be used with nesting queries, right? So there, outer query with the inner query. So now I want to retrieve the director details who have directed movies. As part of this example, we are having a 10 and 11. If director ID is, if it is present, it's an indication that the director has directed some movies, right? So what I want to do is I want to retrieve a directors who have directed at least one movie, It could be what, 2 movies or 100 movies, no issues. But he must direct at least minimum of 1 movies, right? So such kind of directors I want to retrieve. So how can I solve, guys? To solve this, I want to retrieve the details from director. Okay, fine. We required which table? We require director table D. Fine. Because I want to retrieve all director details. Retrieve director details means you can write I want to retrieve DID, I want to retrieve D name. Fine. These 2 things. Anything if I want to retrieve, where to write? I should write it in a select class. So that I'll write select DID D name. Have written director means D. So for that, let me write D.DID, D.DName. Without that also it works, but always try to have a habit of making use of this aliasing, because when you're writing a huge queries, when we are dealing with a huge queries, that means a bigger problem where it requires too much of things to write, or too many tables, or too many conditions. During the time, this aliasing helps us a lot, right? So when I write a director D, then where to write? It has to be written in which class? From, sure. It has to be written in the from class. Let me write from director D. Fine, super. What's the next thing? And these directors, when I write only this much, then what happens? Let me write select star from select star, or what I say, D.DID, D.DName from director D. Only when I write, then it lists me all director details, but actually 12 has not directed any movies. Look at this one, only 10 and 11 we are having, right? It's an indication that the directors as what it is listing, here. So those director IDs, not the name, because we don't have a name, D name in a movie table. This DID should be present, it must be present at least once in a movie table DID column, right? So for that, even it requires a movie table, right? Movie table, yes, movie table. Let me call movie as M. And in the movie table, let me write select star from movie. What is there? We'll look into that. In the movie table, this is a movie table, right? So this DID column should be equal to the DID of this outer query, that is the director DID column. It's an indication that the director has directed some movies, right? At least one movie. So movie table, this DID column. Let me write DID of where? Movie table, super, m.did will write. So always the the attribute listing to be written where, guys? It has to be written in a select class, fine. Table name to be written in a from class, let me write, fine. So when I write only this much, select m.did from DID from movie M. When I write, then it retrieve me 10, 10, 11, right? The result of this query, this part of a query is only this much, is DID 10, 10, 11, fine. What we are expecting? This DID, outer query, this DID should be present in this list. Then only we can say this director ID present in this list. It's an indication that this director has directed a movie, right? So for that, we have to check whether DID, D.DID, this DID, right, let me make some space, D.DID, right, it should be equal to this list. Usually we'll say this DID should be present, means should be equal, should be match with this. That means matching that can be done with the help of equal to operator, that will make use, right? So when I am writing some condition, DID with some quantity we are comparing, always if I am writing a condition, where to write, guys? If any condition, if I want to write on the common attribute, that means the attributes of a table, then that has to be written always in the where class, right? So where D.DID should be equal to this list, right? Where it works? Usually we may say, oh, that's it, simple, it picks from a director table, select star from director. It picks the first row and checks what is the first row, 10, 10 DID, and checks 10 is equal to this, yes, 10 equal to this, then picks. No, guys. Why, let me check. Select, what are the things, D.DID, comma, D.DName, right, from director D. This is what a query we are writing, select D.DID, DName from director, where D.DID should be equal to, that's what we are saying, DID should be equal to the movie table DID, right? Movie table DID, let me write in an inner query, select M.DID from movie M. Showing error, why? As usual, the thing is what we have discussed, the error could be similar to the previous error. Look at this one, guys, subquery returns more than one row, subquery returns more than one row. It's an indication that, look at the result of a subquery, guys. The subquery is saying 10, 10, 11, and the outer query it picks each value and compares it with this. Already I said equal to, not equal to, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. They are having a capacity, a maximum they can compare two values at a single instance of time. They cannot having a capacity to compare a multiple values, one with multiple result values, right? So to achieve it, what I can do, I said in the previous case, where not in fails, during that time they are making use of the brother of not in, the extended version of not in. What is that, guys? Sorry, not equal to, that is not in. Here also same thing, in equivalent, where it's having a extended capability, right? So such operator is in. What we have to say is whether this DID 10, it is there in the list of this DID, that we have to check. That's it. 10 is in the list, yes. If it is true, 10 it is in the list, true, yes. So for that, what it will do? So first it picks this 10, director table 10, it picks 10. 10 is in the list, yes, 10 is in the list. So this will be retrieved. Then 11 it picks, control moves to the next row. What is the value? 11. Is that 11 is in the list? Yes, 11 is in the list at least once, no issues. Then 11 also be retrieved. That means this, okay. Then the control moves to the next row. What is that? 12. 12 comes to this DID. 12 is not in the list. Sorry, 12 is in the list. No, condition fails. 12 is in the list. No, not in the list. So for that the condition fails. 12 will not be retrieved. That's it. Let me verify. So from movie, what is the change we have to make for this query? What change? Replace in equal to by a in. Replace equal to by what? In, to join. To verify whether it is in the list of a subquery returned result. The answer, look at the answer, 10 and 11. This is what the two things as expected, right? As part of this data, right? Yes, it is working. So from this we learned one more interesting operator. What is that, guys? In. where not in can be used to join two queries where we can make use of not equal to, especially subquery returns a more than one result. During the time, always better to make use of not in, not better, always to use, right? Next, so when subquery return, suppose when I are instead of a negation, like for negation conditions not in, right? So for equal to, when I want to compare what is there in the list in such kind of a thing in the subquery return result, to verify that we'll make use of in operator, not equal to operator, where equal to having a capacity to compare only one value which is returned from a subquery result, right? That we have seen with the example maximum age and all, right? Fine, that's it. Have you understood? Yeah. Yes, fine. Let me go with exploring a few more queries. Now, I am having these two tables, director and as well as movie table. Fine. From the movie, I want to find out how many Hindi movies are there, how many Kannada movies are there, that I want to count. That means each language movies are present how many times. That means how many in each language how many movies are present, that I want to calculate. Right? I don't know how many languages are there. Suppose when I write select a count of let's say select simple, count of language or count of movie IDs, because each movie is identified with the help of what? MID, right? Count of movie ID from which table? From movie, right? Where language equal to, let's say when I say Kannada, then it gives me a value like 1, right? Then when I say language equal to Hindi, then when I replace, then we'll get a value like 2, right? For example, let me write select count of MID from movie where language equal to Kannada. Look at this one. I got 1. Suppose when I replace in the same query Kannada by a Hindi, then I get in Hindi 2 movies. But my question is, when I write a query like this, then I need to see the whole movie table and has to see which all the languages are there and type all such language names here and we'll get a count. Then write it one in some other place, right? This is how we can solve. But my question is, I don't want to manually search which all the languages are present in the movie table. My intention is to find out in each language how many movies are there. I'll not pass that movie language as an argument to my query, right? I'll not supply an input. I'll not specify a language, particular language. I want to get all list of count of movies with respect to each and every language which are present in the movie table. That means if I am having 2 more languages, let's say Tamil and Telugu, along with that, I should give me a data, Kannada, how many movies, what is the count of movies, Hindi 2, right, Kannada 1, Hindi 2, Tamil something, Telugu something like this. Suppose if those language movies, if it is present in the movie list. So what I can do? Similar to that in a class, asking, so in each I want to count student. I am having, let's say assume we are having a class where the class contains 100 students. There I want to find out from each city how many students are present. From Hassan, how many students are there? From Mysore, how many? From Bangalore, how many? From Shimoga, from Bagalkot, right? If I want to count how many students are present from each of the district or each of a city, if I want to find out, what I can do? So usually the teacher, how we can calculate in general means, we'll do like this, all Hassan go one side, right, we'll group it separately, then all Mysore separately, then let's say I'll write one diagram so that easily we can imagine the things. Let's say this is a class where there are plenty of students we are having, plenty of students were present. let's say 4, 8, 9 and 10 students are present. Let's say this is Hassan, this is Mysore, and this is Bangalore, then this one is Shimoga, right? Something like this. Have written to which district they are belongs. My question is all about, in the class we are having these many students, right? What I want is, in each city or from each city or each district, how many students are present? That I want. List of city names, along with that, how many count of students from each district, that I want to find out. To do that, usually how we can do is, so first we'll pick each city names. What are the city names we are having, guys? Hassan, right? All similar kind of a thing. Oh, Hassan, fine, Hassan. This will group it once, right? One thing. Then what next? Oh yeah, Mysore, will group it. All Mysore come this end, this will do, this Mysore. Then what we'll do is, all Bangalore, we'll make this as one group, fine. Then Shimoga, so this will select and we'll make a one more group, right? Then is there any left out thing? No, nothing is left out. So all students we grouped, right, based on, depending on, as part of the question, count in each city how many students are, from each city how many students are present, right? So Hassan, Mysore, like that we have grouped. Then what's the next step, guys? Definitely we have to count. Not counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No, that doesn't work, because that gives me an answer like 10. Whether 10 is a right answer? No, it is a right answer. Suppose if a question is like this, count how many students are present in that class. Class contains how many students. If this is a question, then 10 is a right answer. But for our question, in each city how many students are present, then it's a wrong answer. To calculate it, as what we have written last query, that doesn't work, because I need to write for Hassan one query, Mysore, Bangalore, Shimoga, like that. For every city I need to write a separate query, right? How many times you are going to write a query, right? So that becomes a very costly thing. Suppose if tomorrow one more city has added, 1 minute I'll write a query. Oh, very wrong, So what else we can do for this? To solve this, so best thing, as in general, mathematically what we'll do is, we group it according to their cities. Then to say how many students are present in each city, what I need to make? Definitely, yes, I need to perform what? Count. I need to apply a count on what? Not on the whole class. I need to apply a count separately on each group, right? Separately on each group. Count. Apply this count function separately on each group. This how we can do, Yes. Suppose if I apply a count of, let's say USN is used to identify uniquely student and then apply a count on USN, especially on this created group. Then what's the answer we'll get? 2. Then when I apply on this group, I'll get 1, 2, 3. Then when I apply on this, I'll get count as 2. When I apply the same thing on this, I'll get answer as 3. Then at the end, what I expected, I want to print is city Hassan, that is city name, then count. Count of what? USN. This I want to print. Hassan, how many? What is the count? 2. Yes. From Mysore, what is the count? 3. Then from Shimoga, what is the count? It is 3. This is what I expected answer to be printed. Right. To solve this, let me write. We'll try to program. That means code the picture, code the thing as what we're having here. As part of this, can I able to write one diagram for this movie? That means counting in each language. How many movies are there? Definitely. First, we'll try to write a diagram. Later, we'll go with writing a query. So, as part of this, let's say this is a movie table, right? Movie will write. So, we are having movie ID, 3 movies, right? 1, 2, 3, 1. These are all 3 movies we are having. Let me add its corresponding language. The movie ID 1 belongs to a language called Kannada. Let me attach K here. Then 2, it's of Hindi. Yes, I'll attach. Then 3, movie ID 3, it is of Hindi. Fine. I want to count in each language how many movies are there. What is the thing to be done? group according to in each language how many movies, each language. So that group depends on a language, depending upon a language, similar type of language. Hindi grouped separately, Kannada grouped separately, right, like this. Suppose if I am having let's say I'll write some A, then B, so let's say I'll say some one Kannada, one more, then during the time, let's say 4, and this as B as some 5, let me call the name Telugu. Then during the time A and B were 4 and 5, right? So here 4 also belongs to the group of which one? To the Kannada group, because this also belongs to Kannada language, right? So then what about this B, 5? 5 forms a one more new group because it belongs to Telugu language, right? So this forms a one more group. Things becomes like this. So how many groups are created? 3 groups. So groups should be created dynamically depending upon the how many languages we are having, right? So like that we have to make. Then after that we need to go with what? Counting. Count, right? Apply a count on each of the group. Here 2, then here 1, here again 1 and 2, then here 1. Suppose if I am having these 2 data, right? Suppose if we don't have these 2 things, then we don't have this and we don't have this, only this. The expected answer is 1 for this group, this count is 2 for this group, right? So like this. So let me go with coding this picture. First, what we did. In each language, how many movies are present? To solve this, what we did is, first we went to a particular table. To solve this query, which table is required? The tables which are required to solve this is, only the movie table is enough, right? So let me make use of movie. We used movie table, let me write movie, fine, movie, I can write. Next, what next we did? We considered the movie table, the whole movie table is present, right? What next? What is the second step we did? The second step we did is we grouped. Sure, yes, we grouped. So let me write group by, we grouped. So for that I am writing group by, right? Fine. Group based on how we grouped, guys? Based on any attribute, any condition, any criteria we are having to group? Yes. To make this group, we used a language as a criteria, right? Language we have used. So for that we grouped based on the language column. Let me write language. Language, because language belongs to movie table. So if I am writing a table name, then where to write? Always to be written in a from class, right? To be written in a from class, that I have written from. Then after this, what I want to retrieve, guys? Then after grouping, what we did is, we went for counting on each group. Then once after executing these 2 things, what we did is, what happens is 2 groups will be created as part of this data, right? This data, 2 groups as created. What next we did? We did count, applying a count kind of an aggregate function on each of the group, right? So let me go with count. Count. What we counted actually, 3, 4, 1, these are all what? The movie IDs, where we are using these IDs to identify each movie uniquely, right? So for that, we should make use of MID, movie ID, and MID belongs to where, guys? To the movie table. These are all movie IDs, right? M.movie ID. Group it, then on each group, apply a count. This is what we did, right? Then what exactly I want to retrieve? In each language, how many movies? In each language, how many movies that we have to count, right? So for that, I want to retrieve the language also. In each language, how many movies? So for that, language belongs to which table? At the end, what is the expected answer is Kannada 1 movie, Hindi 2 movie. Like this I want to print, So for that, 2 columns to be printed is only is a count column. Count column I have written already, right? The one more column to be printed is the language column. Language I am writing, right? Language, fine. Then after this, where to write this one in guys? Language or count, also things where to write. Any retrieval thing to be written in the select class, right? So let me write it in select class. Select language, these things, that's it. then it gives me the answer. Let me verify whether it works or not. What we did first, we went to movie table from movie M, right? We pictured this, we programmed this picture now, right? That's it. That's only coding is very simple, guys. Come up with a mathematical solution, then code. That's it. Program the picture, right? So we are in that fashion, right? From movie M. Then what? Go to home. Then count. Sorry. What we did is from movie M. Then after this, we grouped. We went to movie table. Then we grouped, right? So group by what? Group by what? Language, right? M dot language. Fine. Then what we did? We applied a count, applied a count on each group. What we counted? We counted 1, 2, that is movie IDs, right? M dot MID, fine. And I want to display what? And I want to display their language name also, along with the count, right? Along with the count, I want to display even the language also. So for that, I'll write M dot language, fine. And these two are the things to be retrieved. So for that to be written where? In the select class. Select, fine. Enter. Look at this one, guys. Hindi 2, Kannada 1, we are getting. That's it. Simple, That means from this we learned one thing. We learned one more clause of SQL that we called by name group by. Till yesterday, we learned the classes like select, right? Then we learned from class. In the select class, we can write the list of attributes in which we plan to display. Then in the from class, we can write the table names, right? Where exactly it has picked, which are the tables to be used, right? Then after this, we discovered one more class called where. With the help of this where, we can write a conditions. And today we introduced one more interesting thing that we called by name group by class. With the help of this group by class, we can create a group, and on each group I can apply what, guys? Count. Count is what? Basically an aggregate function. We can group it and we can apply count, sum, add, right? All such aggregate functions on each of them, right? It is possible. So tomorrow we'll continue the further part of these things. We'll try to explore few more clauses of this SQL query, retrieval select query, right? So thank you. Thanks for listening.